Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric Entertaining Series, the Port Authority, where I weigh some of my favorite arcade games against their home console counterparts. But today we're doing things slightly different. We're playing both versions of OutRun Online Arcade, one on Xbox 360 and the other on PlayStation 3. Because every single time I talk about OutRun, people ask about the PlayStation 3 and Xbox versions of the game, so we're going to be directly comparing them today. And if you're not aware, these games are basically cut down ports of OutRun 2 SP-SDX on Sega Arcade hardware, which I've talked about in the past being my favorite version of the game to play, and in my opinion the best version of the game overall. But these came out on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 respectively, and sadly both of them have been delisted for a while now because Sega lost the license to Ferrari and couldn't keep selling the game. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. If you take a look at the bottom left hand corner, you will see the logo of the system we are playing. Now moving over to the Xbox 360 version, it's going to be the exact same track over and over again, kind of comparing and contrasting the different versions of the game. Now right off the top, the good news is there isn't a bad version of OutRun Online Arcade. They are both fun to play, they both have a great frame rate. There isn't a clear winner or loser here, but there are some differences between both versions that we can talk about if you decide that you want to play these. And again, because they are delisted, if they're not already on your hardware, they can be slightly difficult to actually obtain. But I would say on the 360 side of things, the color saturation is slightly less, and maybe in a good way. Every once in a while, the PlayStation 3 feels like the bloom and the color saturation are actually muddying up some of the visuals, but in other instances it actually looks like it's performing slightly better. It is a very mixed bag depending on the frame and the area you're on, what looks better. And just so you know, on PlayStation 3 I am playing, on Xbox 360 Andy D is playing, and I've created a friendly competition he doesn't know about to see who's going to get the better time and the better score overall. So we're going to find out exactly who's the better racer right now. And moving back to the PlayStation 3 version of the game, really, if I didn't put the logos up on screen, I feel like 9 out of 10 of you wouldn't actually be able to guess, but if you take a look at the overall image quality on PlayStation 3, it looks ever so slightly softer. Now, they do seem to be running at the exact same resolution. There just seems to be more screen filtration or otherwise effects over top the PlayStation 3 version that gives it a slightly softer image, and I would say in some stages that works to its advantage, in other stages I think it actually is to its disadvantage. Here when we're going through the downtown area, the sky seems to be ever so slightly maybe overblown, like it's losing the details in the lightest parts, and you lose a little bit of definition on the clouds. But honestly, that is a very small thing. If you look at the particle effects when we actually grind up against anything, if you look at the smoke effects from the tires, they look quite good here, so pay attention to those as we continue to drive. The skybox, the sparks, the clouds, that's where you're going to see maybe the most fundamental difference in my opinion between the two versions of the game. And again, we're going to be going through the exact same areas on both the Xbox 360 as well as PlayStation 3. So let's jump over to the Xbox 360 version and take a look at those clouds in the background and the overall sharpness here. It's a slightly sharper image, and I do think that looks better on the Xbox 360. Now unfortunately on both of these ports it is a cut down version of OutRun 2 SP-SDX, and that's down to the fact that they were download only titles and there were still caps on how big a game could be, so you're only getting the SP courses here. The original 15 courses from OutRun 2 are missing, and you've also gotten some of the vehicles cut down as numbers. But you'll see here, if we take a look at those clouds, you see a little bit more definition in them, and you get a tiny bit more definition in the smoke in my opinion, but I am really pixel peeping here to try to find the differences between the two. But I told you guys after the last video when you asked what about these versions of the game that I had plans to get to it. That's exactly what we're doing today. But the good thing is you can still play both of these games on the Xbox 360, on PlayStation 3. You can add them to your consoles. You can use RCPS3 for PlayStation 3. The sky's the limit as to how you play them. The only wrong way is to not play at all. But now we're going to do the soundtrack sample. First we're going to do PlayStation 3 audio, then we're going to move to Xbox 360. And again, I did leave the logo for both consoles in the bottom left hand corner so you can tell, but you tell me which one sounds better.
checkpoint. What fun!
Honestly, both versions of the game sound excellent, but I would say on the Xbox 360 side of things, maybe the music is slightly higher of a sample rate or just a little bit more clear in its overall audio balance. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me. Back on the PlayStation 3 version of the game, we'll take a look here at the next stage and see exactly what's going on. We're going through Casino Town in both the PlayStation 3 as well as the Xbox 360. And this is an area that takes place a little bit later in night and has a lot of light, so it is a good place to talk about the bloom across both versions of the game, because I would say it's very close to both SP-SDX as well as the PC version of the game as far as having that extra bloom that stuff like the original Xbox didn't do quite as well. Because while I love the Xbox port of this game, I have it in my collection, play it all the time, this is definitely a way better version of the game as far as console releases are concerned. So on PlayStation 3 here, I'd say everything looks good. The sky is dramatic, those inky pinks and purples, all of the streetlights have a nice bloom to them, and as we actually go through some of the neon areas here, it is a very pleasing image to the eye. But this is another level in which I think the Xbox 360 has a slight advantage. So when we move over to that, pay attention to the lights and everything else you see, and you tell me what you think. Because coming into Casino Town here, it is sharper and that bloom is reduced down, but we lose a little bit of vibrancy in the clouds here. You're going to see it is ever so slightly more muted. Now again, it is basically the same game, but of course the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 are going to handle graphics differently because they are different platforms, and these are the slight variants you get when you have a multi-platform game that runs well on both, and that is the reality. The frame rate is going to be rock solid across both versions of the game. The only other thing I've ever noticed about the PlayStation 3 version versus the Xbox 360 version is the rumble on the PlayStation 3 seems really weak in comparison to the Xbox 360. It just doesn't have that same impact. But as far as the driving, drifting, and overall handling mechanics are concerned, they are of course identical because it is the same game. Now let's go side by side here on a head-to-head comparison. This is going to be maybe the most dramatic difference of all. Because if you take a look at the skybox, you're going to see now it seems like there's a little bit less detail on the Xbox 360 side of things, and like it's almost overexposed and a little bit hot, where the PlayStation 3 dynamic range on the stop seems to be a little bit better. But the bloom on the lighting when you actually are looking into the sun, I don't like it as much on the PlayStation 3, and overall, when you see that light on the walls, it causes the textures to feel like it's losing a little bit of detail and resolution. It really isn't, but it's just how that bloom works. So for me, again, the Xbox 360 is just the more visually appealing version of the game, but we are talking fractions here of a percentage, because both look absolutely incredible. There's just something about the Xbox 360 image that is slightly more pleasing to my eye, but again, you tell me down below in the comments, because this is probably the closest port authority we're ever going to have, because I am splitting hairs here on the comparison. But you'll see here, as far as the competition between Andy D and I that he doesn't realize he's part of, I've taken the crown for the first part. But now we're going to move over to Heart Attack mode and see who can score more, and we're starting on the Xbox 360 side of things, and this forest area is one of the areas where I can definitely tell that the Xbox 360 just has more visual fidelity and more sharpness in the image compared to the 360. Look at the trees, look at the logs, look at the road, look at everything you see on your screen, and we jump over to the PlayStation 3 version of the game, look at those exact same items. They just soften up ever so slightly. It just has a softer image as far as the screen is concerned. And that's something, I just want that extra detail in my Sega games. I want sharp textures. I don't want as much screen space effects going on. But again, that is 100% wholly subjective, and that is the thing when it comes to these close Port Authority episodes. We basically have to put the games under the microscope and find those tiny little differences that we do or don't like to kind of recommend a version of the game that you want to play. But I will say that the overall look for PlayStation 3 definitely does a better job when you have the more fantasy vibes going on. all of these streetlights on the ground here, and that bloom looks slightly better than the Xbox 360 version on the same stage in my opinion, because all of those streetlights should have that softness to them. So it is one of those things, the calls of the GPUs on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 are always going to look slightly different because they are slightly different hardware, even if they are made by the same manufacturer. Depending on how the console manufacturers set up those calls and how developers use them, you can get a different image for sure, even though it is the same game. But at least right here on the Milky Way area, I would say that the PlayStation 3 version looks slightly better, and that's definitely subjective. Again, you can tell me down below. But let's move over to the 360 version because we're going to close out the video on that. I'm going to render my verdict as far as who's the winner here, but you'll see I got 1076 as far as the hearts are concerned. I think if you're going to play one version of OutRun Online Arcade, you should make it the Xbox 360 version of the game. If you are playing on real hardware, it's just one of those things that's sharper, and I just think it looks slightly better. Now, if you want to emulate these things, you can definitely articulate the settings any way you want, but I will say you get much better emulation performance on RPCS3 than you're going to get trying to emulate the 360 version of the game, at least in my experience. So if you're emulating, you want to go PlayStation 3, but the only wrong way to play this game is to not play it. And again, it is a fun pivot version on the OutRun 2 formula, and it's basically the last official release of OutRun 2 as that downloadable experience. But if you've never played OutRun 2 in any way, shape, or form, play SP-SDX on Teknoparrot. It's the prettiest, most complete version of the game you're going to get. You tell me down below which one you prefer, having seen all of the footage. Do you like the PlayStation 3 version better, or do you like the Xbox 360 version better? I feel like it's going to be a pretty even vote between people, but just tell me which one do you think looks better, performs better, and overall is the version you would play if you only had the ability to pick one and you had to get rid of the other one forever. And again, because these are both delisted, you're going to have to do a little bit of work to actually play them. But the biggest question is, can Andy D outscore 1076 on the heart meter here and end up tying me, and we take this thing to a draw? We have to tally up his score here, and we're going to find out and see. And if it is a tie, give me a suggestion for a tiebreaker down below. And damn it, he did beat me, so it is a tie. Bye-bye.